Hello, my name's Jim. Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. Today, we're going to be doing a discussion of top 50 players in the 2025 NFL Draft. This podcast is being recorded on October 3rd. It is the Thursday night the Falcons and Buccaneers play in a few hours. So what we're going to do is this podcast is going to focus on teams 9 through 16 of the draft order. So that's going to start with the Denver Broncos. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick Denver. We're going to pick first round challenge on the NFL draftfanatics.com mock draft simulator. And a first round challenge is 5 unique round 1 picks. So a couple things about this simulator. Anytime you draft a player, they move up the draft board. Okay. Anytime you skip a player, they move down a little bit. So if we look here, this board is set up pretty well. So meaning that the top 5 players are Burden, Scorton, Graham, McMillan, and Banks. I think all those players fit a need for Denver. The only difference is what I'm going to say is my opinion of the order. If I was Denver and Mason Graham is available, I think that's a slam dunk pick. I like building a team from the lines out. So especially you have your quarterback. The next thing that the Broncos would do would be fill out the line. So we talk about Mason Graham. Okay, who is your edge one? Is it Nick Scorton? Is it James Pierce? I like Scorton, so I'm picking Scorton for the Broncos. Okay, so I think Tacario McMillan, the wide receiver from Arizona, would be a really good pick for Sean Payton in his offense in Denver. So I'm picking McMillan. Now, I want to make sure in this section that we talk about not just the top players. So you can see Travis Hunter, Will Campbell, Emory Jones sitting at the top. I want to make sure I can talk about other players. So a wide receiver that needs to be talked about right around 8 to 16 on your draft boards is Isaiah Bond from Texas. So I'm going to pick Bond for the Broncos. He will move up their player board because I picked him. And then another player to consider would be linebacker Abdul Carter from Penn State. So he's playing edge this year. He played linebacker last year. If he sticks with linebacker, he is probably a top 15 pick. If you're picking him as an edge, he's probably going to slide a little bit further down your draft board. Okay, so 5 first-round suggestions for the Denver Broncos. Defensive lineman Mason Graham from Michigan. Edge Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. Wide receiver Tacario McMillan from Arizona. Wide receiver Isaiah Bond from Texas. And linebacker Abdul Carter from Penn State. Okay, next team we're going to talk about is Carolina. So Carolina, first round challenge, entering the draft. Okay, so I am assuming that if Carolina has the opportunity to select a new quarterback, that they will. So we can look at, this is the draft that's already happened. So you can look to see like who was already picked. Okay, so quarterback Cameron Ward would be a player I think would be very high on Carolina's draft board. I also think Jalen Milroe from Alabama is under consideration for the Carolina Panthers. And then Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback from LSU. Okay, so what else would the Panthers do? So because they took a wide receiver, Xavier Legette, last year, I probably wouldn't go wide receiver this year. I do like edge Nick Scorton to the Panthers, so I'm going to pick him. And I would go corner Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame over those 3 wide receivers and over Jalen Walker. Okay, so 5 first-round suggestions for the Carolina Panthers. Quarterback Cameron Ward from Miami. Quarterback Jalen Milroe from Alabama. Quarterback Garrett Nussmeier from LSU. Edge Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. Cornerback Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. Next team, San Francisco 49ers, using the Week 2 NFL draft order. So let's talk about the San Francisco 49ers, and let's talk about some players that should both be first-round picks and would be reasonable selections to consider for the 49ers. Okay, so I am, like you can see, like Cameron Ward is pretty high on the board here. So some of what I'm going to try to do is see if, can I get Cameron Ward's value there, see his rank is 8. I'm going to try to get his value lower. So, okay. So if we look at who's already gone, Will Campbell, Emory Jones were both gone. Kelvin Banks is there. So I think if the 49ers have a chance to get a franchise tackle, Kelvin Banks would be a good choice. And my next pick is going to be another tackle. And even if Jones is available, I'm going to go somewhere else. So the tackle I want to talk about is Ariante Ursary. Okay. So would I take Ursary 11th overall? Questionable. But there is debate over who is tackle 1 in this class. So while preseason had 2 tackles at the top of the draft class, I think you're going to hear Emory Jones and Ariante Ursary enter the picture as first-round offensive tackles. So I'm going to pick Ursary. Okay. Other players. So I would definitely like to talk about Maliki Starks, the safety from Georgia. So Starks is probably a top 15 player. So he's likely, when people start talking about first-round grades coming out after the combine, I think Starks is going to be one of the 15 players with a first-round grade. So I'm going to go Starks there. And then would the 49ers go with Will Campbell or Carson Beck? And I'm going to say they need the tackle. I'm a believer in Brock Purdy. So I'm going to pick Campbell over Beck. And again, I'm strategically picking that, hoping that Beck moves down and Campbell moves up. Okay, and then we talked about Abdul Carter. Another linebacker to talk about is Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma. So one of the things I love about San Francisco is they always have good linebackers. And I do have a theory that if you're a Final Four NFL team, if you are playing in the NFC or the AFC Conference Championship games, linebacker play is really important. So let's talk about Danny Stutzman from Oklahoma, and that finishes the first-round challenge. So 5 first-round picks for the San Francisco 49ers to consider. Kelvin Banks, tackle from Texas. Ariante Ursary, offensive tackle from Minnesota. Maliki Starks, safety from Georgia. Will Campbell, offensive tackle from LSU. And Danny Stutzman, linebacker from Oklahoma. The Detroit Lions, using a Week 2 NFL draft order. Okay, so if I were to think of the Lions and what they need, they have Jack Campbell. Could they use another off-ball linebacker? Could they go defensive tackle? Dan Campbell, their coach, to me, likes to build the team from the lines. And I actually think the Lions have one of the better offensive lines in the league. But we will point out, I will grab at least one offensive lineman that we haven't talked about yet. I also think the Lions would be in play for a wide receiver. Now, granted, Jamison Williams has started the season off strong, and they have him on St. Brown. And they also have Sam Laporta, so I'm probably not looking at offensive skill players, right? The only position on offense I could possibly see myself going here with Detroit would be, let's make the first pick a guard, because there's some players I haven't talked about yet. So the first guard I want to talk about is from Ohio State, Donovan Jackson. I think we're going to see an interior offensive lineman go in round 1. I've already talked about Tyler Booker in a prior podcast. This time I want to talk about Donovan Jackson. Another player, Kenneth Grant, I think on the interior. At the 12th pick of the draft, there's not going to be a lot of first-round grades left, and Kenneth Grant is definitely going to be one of the players with a first-round grade, so I'm going to pick him there. James Pierce, the edge, opposite Aiden Hutchinson, could be interesting. I'm going to go Pierce. Linebacker, another linebacker we haven't talked about. Off-ball linebacker Barrett Carter from Clemson. Okay, so what we're going to see as we start to get towards the back half of the first round is I think this year you're going to see a huge variation, especially at like pick 20 to 32, where some people are going to have a player go at pick 20. Some people are going to have that same player go at pick 60. I think the grades there are going to be about even, meaning there's not a lot of first-round grades. It's going to be more second-round grades this year. So we're going to kind of – Barrett Carter, to me, is going to be one of those players. Does he go as high as like pick 20, or does he fall to the back of round 2? Okay, so we see Burden and McMillan. They're already at the top of the draft card. I've already talked about them so much. JT Tuimoloau, edge from Ohio State, is a player we haven't talked about yet, and he needs to be in the first-round conversation. So I'm going to pick him. So we got some new names here. So Detroit Lions, first-round picks. Guard, Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. Defensive lineman, Kenneth Grant from Michigan. Edge, James Pierce from Tennessee. Linebacker, Barrett Carter from Clemson. And edge, JT Tuimoloau from Ohio State. Okay, so now let's go Green Bay. And we're going to do a first-round challenge. 5 unique first-round picks for Green Bay. And again, we're going to try to get some new names here. So what I'm generally doing is I'm coming in, as I'm looking at the board, and like if I see a quarterback, like Sanders is 5th, I don't think the Packers would pick a quarterback. And this simulator is entirely player board based. There is no team need algorithm. So I definitely think Scorton was there for the Packers. He's the pick, probably the best edge rusher of the class. So that's a good name to talk about for round 1. Another name to talk about for round 1, we haven't talked about Jalen Walker, the linebacker or edge from Georgia. So definitely in the first round conversation. he definitely is a player that has moved up draft boards. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of other guys. So we have not talked about Jahdae Barron, the corner from Texas. So I think for the Packers, Barron's a really good pick. So is he a safety? Is he a slot? Is he a boundary corner? What he is a really good football player. So there's going to be some flexibility with where the Packers can put him. I know that the Packers have a team need at safety. Is Barron capable of doing that? I'll let people smarter than me make that decision. But I think Barron to the Packers is a really good team and position fit. Okay. Another edge that we haven't talked about yet is Michael Williams from Georgia. Is he a round one edge? So I'm going to pick him in round one here. That's a name that we should get familiar with in the back half of round one. But again, I have seen boards where Williams is as high as 20. I have seen other boards where he isn't even in round two, meaning that he's at like player 65, round 3 grade. So we're definitely looking for what is going to be that final grade for Michael Williams, the edge from Georgia. And then Benjamin Morrison should be higher than Shedeur Sanders for the Green Bay Packers. So that was why I just picked Morrison. So 5 first-round suggestions for the Green Bay Packers. Edge, Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. Edge, Jalen Walker from Georgia. Cornerback, Jahdae Barron from Texas. Edge, Michael Williams from Georgia. And corner, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. Okay. Now we're going to do the Chicago Bears. Okay, so to me, the Bears, offensive line, and I'm just going to say the word defense. If there's a good defensive player, they should take him. Okay, so for example, if Nick Scorton's there, I definitely think he would be a player the Bears would consider. And they would definitely take him over Blake Miller. But that's interesting. You can see Bears fans have used the simulator because, look, Blake Miller is 10th overall. So there is a Bears fan out there. I'm going to give you a shout out for using the simulator. The only way Blake Miller gets there is if a Bears fan has picked Blake Miller more than once. Another player that would be a good fit for the Bears, in my opinion, Kenneth Grant. They're 14th overall. Again, if I see Grant anywhere outside the top 10, he's a first-round grade player. So just you can build your team around a defensive tackle. Okay, so other players that the Bears could consider. I'm now moving to the second page. So Malachi Starks, safety from Georgia, would definitely be a player. Again, he's going to be a first-round grade. I think he should be higher on their board. And I'm also going to mention, for the first time, corner Tacario Davis from Arizona. And then the last player would be Benjamin Morrison, corner from Notre Dame. Okay, so 5 players for Chicago Bears in round 1 to talk about. Edge, Nick Scorton from Texas A&M. Defensive lineman, Kenneth Grant from Michigan. Safety, Malachi Starks from Georgia. Cornerback, Tacario Davis from Arizona. And cornerback, Benjamin Morrison from Notre Dame. Okay, Dallas Cowboys. Using the Week 2 NFL draft order. Okay, we're going to get some new names here for Dallas. So Ashton Genty is likely going to be RB1 and is likely going to be one of the 15 to 19 players with a first-round grade. So if Genty's there and the Cowboys don't pick him, I would be surprised. Whether the Cowboys are picking 15th or 32nd or anywhere in between, I even think if Dallas is even finishing in the top 10, that Genty would still be the pick. So let's talk about some of the other running backs. So another running back for round 1 would be Omarion Hampton from North Carolina. So 2 running backs here for Dallas. Okay, what else would Dallas need? I think Dallas at wide receiver. So you can see Isaiah Bond is already high on the Dallas board. So people coming in have already been mocking Isaiah Bond to the Cowboys. Let's talk about another possible first-round wide receiver, Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Okay, new name. Okay, let's talk about offensive line. So I've mentioned Booker. I've mentioned Donovan Jackson as possible first-round guards. Another guard to consider is Jonas Savaiinaea from Arizona. So we should get used to hearing his name in round 1. I'm not saying he will, but he's definitely one of the top 50 players in the draft. So what you're going to see, and I've mentioned this before on this podcast, is once we're outside of like the top 15 prospects, from player 20 to player 60 on a big board, one person's going to have somebody at 20, a different person's going to have the same player at 60. They're pretty much all in the same tier. It's just about, does your team need a guard or does your team need a different position? So Savaiinaea, first time I've mentioned him on the podcast. Another player we haven't talked about is cornerback Denzel Burke from Ohio State. Okay, so 5 first-round picks for Dallas Cowboys fans to start talking about. Running back Ashton Genty from Boise State. Running back Omarion Hampton from North Carolina. Wide receiver Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State. Guard Jonas Savaiinaea from Arizona, and cornerback Denzel Burke from Ohio State. Okay, and this will be the last team I'm drafting for on this podcast. Let's do the Washington Commanders. Okay, so for me, the Commanders, offensive tackle, corner, maybe wide receiver. I think the Commanders would be able to pick up the receiver in round 2, but they missed on a tackle in last year's draft, and tackle was a huge need last year. So I see Scorton sitting at the top of the draft card, and generally speaking, this draft card looks pretty good to me. And if we look, like all the offensive tackles, Campbell's gone, Jones is gone, Banks is gone, Ursery's gone. Okay, so who do we talk about? So I'm going to talk about 2 more, and that's going to be Miller and Willem. So Blake Miller from Clemson to the Commanders. And you can see Ursery is sitting pretty high on their draft card. I'm also going to talk about Wyatt Millen from West Virginia. So if the Commanders are picking in the back half of round 1, and they still, and let's say all those other tackles went off the board, we need to have, Blake Miller's a project. He's not going to be ready to play week 1, 2025. But there's enough tools there that's a tackle that we need to talk about either in round 2 or late round 1, definitely a top 50 player. Wyatt Millen, is he in the top 50? Right? We're going to start that conversation now. So I've seen some boards with Willem in the top 50. I've seen some boards with him outside the top 50. But it's definitely something to pay attention to with the player. Is he, because there's not going to be a lot of tackles this year. It is not going to be as good as the tackle class in 2024. If you're drafting late, and there's going to be several teams drafting late that need a tackle, are they going to wait until pick 60 to take the tackle, or do they have to reach for it in round 1? So let's talk about that. Commanders also need a corner. So we have talked about Denzel Burke. I see where he is on the draft board. I'm going to pick him and move him up. And I also saw that Tacario Davis was further down, so he's going to be the next pick for the Commanders. So Tacario Davis, corner for Arizona. So we've done 2 tackles, and we've done 2 corners. And we've talked already about, and I'm looking to see if Tyler Warren. So we see Tyler Warren. We've already talked about him, but I see where he is, and I want to move him up on the Commanders draft board. So I'm going to pick Tyler Warren because I believe they need a tight end. Okay, so for the Commanders, 5 first-round picks to get the conversation started. Tackle Blake Miller from Clemson. Tackle Wyatt Millam from West Virginia. Cornerback Denzel Burke from Ohio State. Cornerback Tacario Davis from Arizona. Or tight end Tyler Warren from Penn State. Okay, so that's going to wind down this podcast. Thank you very much for watching. At this point, we've probably covered about 30 names that are in the top 50. We still have half the teams to go, and that podcast will be coming at you a little bit later. My name is Jim. I'm with NFLDraftFanatics.com. You can follow me on X at NFL Draft Fanatic. There is no I in Fanatic. The NFLDraftFanatics.com draft simulator, which you're seeing here, is a dynamic simulator. That means when you pick players, they move up. So each of the players you saw me pick, I'm moving them up the team board as part of the discussion to say, these are players we need to start talking about with round 1 grades. These are top 50 players. Are they going to push themselves into round 1? If you have any questions on the simulator, please comment on the podcast. If you have any comments on the players that I picked, leave them on the YouTube notes. We love our fans on YouTube telling us that we missed a player or they want to hear us talk about a player more. So definitely welcome that feedback. Again, my name is Jim, and on behalf of the Mrs. R Relevant podcast and NFLDraftFanatics.com, thank you very much for watching. And remember, any day is draft day if you have the right attitude. Have a great day, everybody.